allowing me to invite myself here. So the trip that we want to tell you about is one that we took to Southern Africa 3 months before we moved to the Worcester area. So we took a little vacation from packing boxes and wrapping up stuff in order to travel with Overseas Adventure Travel to Southern Africa. And I'm going to do most of the talking, but Ross is going to jump up now and then with some additional commentary. And then at the end, which I hope will be around 10 o'clock, and you hope that too, we're going to have about a 3-minute video to see if this works. And among other things, you'll see some movement of elephants at a waterfall, at a water hole. You will see Victoria Falls, and then you will see Roz dancing with the Shona tribesmen in Jabulani village, if this all works. So with that, we can turn down the lights, and we flew from Atlanta to Johannesburg in South Africa. 16 hours in the air, no stopping. At the time, it was the second longest regularly scheduled airplane flight in the world. They now have some 17 and a half hour flights from Newark, New Jersey to Singapore and so forth. But you basically get on this airplane and live there, get to know your neighbors really well. There's a gas station, by the way, in Senegal, which is here. And so if that little light on the dashboard goes on the 757 jet, says you're low on gas, you can stop in Dakar and get some. But we were doing well on the gas mileage, so 16 hours later, landed in Joburg. And this is the area of Southern Africa where we're going to do some traveling around. So we landed in Johannesburg, which is in South Africa, and then we went to Zimbabwe. Actually, we went by way of an airport in Zambia, so we spent an hour and a half in Zambia, driving back to the border. And then we went to a little portion of Namibia up in here, and then down into Botswana. The main objective, of course, was to look at animals in the game parks, but Overseas Adventure Travel also wants you to know a little bit about the language, the culture, the customs, and so forth. So just a little bit of history of this area. These, of course, were all colonized by European people, and there were native populations already there. South Africa, Zimbabwe, which used to be Southern Rhodesia, and Botswana, which used to be the Bechuanaland Protectorate, were all colonized by the British. But earlier, they were colonized by the Africans, and in fact, the British, and the Dutch in the case of South Africa, when they arrived, the Shona and the Zulu tribes were moving down from the north at the same time, pushing the native population, which we call Bushmen and they call San or Takung. The original hunter-gatherers were in this area more than in the other countries. So there's a sense in which the whole apartheid business that went on in South Africa between the whites and the blacks, both whites and blacks were colonizing what had been the original area. But these areas were colonized by the British, except for Namibia, which was a German colony. And so part of the reason that Botswana is there at all is because once the Germans colonized Namibia, the British thought we ought to have some kind of buffer in between the two. And so they made Botswana a protectorate, but nobody really wanted it because there was nothing there except these Bushmen running around hunting and gathering. Namibia, part of the reason for the German colonization was that they wanted to construct a railroad across, across Africa from Namibia to Mozambique, the Portuguese colony. And so they, among other things, colonized this area, the Captiva Strip, which is where we were. And the reason they did that was because they wanted to build a railroad, and the question was asked after the fact of colonization, well, what are you going to do with this railroad when you get to Victoria Falls, which is almost 400 feet high? And they thought, no, we hadn't thought about that. So there was never a railroad, but there's still that little strip of Namibia. Botswana, just parenthetically, has gold and diamonds. So does South Africa. And so did Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. In Botswana, nobody knew that there was gold and diamonds there until after it gained independence. So the history of Botswana has been a little bit different. They said, okay, you people who live there, you can be an independent African nation. And a couple of years later, they found they had gold and diamonds, and it was too late for the British to go back in. So Botswana is actually doing pretty well. They have some issues there and so forth. So on with the travel. So we flew into Johannesburg. This is what it looks like. It's a big modern city with skyscrapers and electric lights and all these other sorts of things. And when you give this talk to people back in Columbus, Ohio, they have a hard time believing that. You know, that Columbus does also have electricity.
What are those two towers?
Those are kind of observation towers and rotating restaurants. The same thing like you have in Las Vegas and Toronto and Seattle. It's the African Space Needle, I guess. I don't know the names of the towers. Didn't spend a whole lot of time in Joburg, in fact. But this is the group that we went with. There will be my lovely bride there, and the couple who's sitting next to us, they all also are from Columbus, Ohio, and we've been on 6 overseas adventure travel trips with them. Overseas adventure travel specializes in small groups and never more than 16, and there were 10 in our group, which allows us to go places and do things that the big bus with the Grand Circle people can't go to. When you get those 40 Grand Circle people, they just want souvenirs and food. I know they want more than that, but you know, there are places you just can't go. There are roads that you can't take that big bus down. You know, you're stuck. And overseas adventure travel can get into some of these smaller places.
Thompson.
And Thompson is featured in our next slide. This is our guide, Thompson Matumbi. He's from Zimbabwe, from Harare, the capital city. He's a professional guide. His wife is a lawyer. And he was a great guy. He was with us the whole time. And he was named after the obstetrician who delivered him. He was delivered by one Dr. Thompson, and it was a difficult birth. And so in gratitude, Thompson was named after that guy. And I'm not going to take you step by step through the trip so much as to tell you some of what the trip was like. This is the way we traveled. We all had matching duffel bags except for our name tags. Made life a lot easier in terms of packing up the bus in the morning and unpacking and getting everything to our rooms. And the first thing we did in Johannesburg was get up and go back to the airport and get on another airplane and fly up to Nelspruit, which is near the border with Mozambique, which is the next door country. But more importantly, it's where Kruger National Park is, and so that's when we started looking at big game. This is the first of the big game that we saw, Coca-Cola can rhinoceros in the baggage claim area at Nelspruit Airport. Okay, typical accommodation, I just told you this. There's our little cozy cottage that we stayed at. We ate our meals family style in a central facility. Very nice food, well prepared in almost all cases. And then a nice double bed, coffee pot, mosquito netting everywhere. That's standard because of mosquito-transmitted diseases. I can tell you all about that if you want, but I'm not going to right now. And a nice little decorative toilet paper roll, little flower petal in there. They're a step ahead of the Hilton with those little triangle deals. And, outdoor shower in many cases. And that's because the weather allows that, except in the dead of winter. So here we are eating family style. This was our first lodge there, right near Kruger Park. And notice these are the warthogs that were sharing our lawn with us. And they don't bother you if you don't bother them. Just beyond the warthogs is an electric fence. The electric fence keeps the larger animals out, so that you're not troubled by elephants, rhinoceroses, lions, and leopards while you're dining in there or swimming. The warthogs just dig under the fence, and so it doesn't stop the warthogs. Okay, typical day. Pretty much throughout the trip. 5:30 wake-up call for breakfast, and then Jeep drive to the park, whatever park it was, where we were observing the wildlife. It's about 55 degrees. This is October, which is their spring. More importantly, it's the end of the dry season. It's still dry, the water levels are at their lowest, and so the animals concentrate around the water holes. So if you want to find the animals, you just go to the water holes, and they'll be there because there's no place else they can get water. So we look for animals until around 10:30 in the morning, and then we come back to the lodge for brunch, siesta. There might be a talk, but we definitely want to get out of the sun. It would get up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit or more, and the animals get out of the sun. So, yeah, good idea for large animals like ourselves who need lots of water, get out of the sun. Then we go back to the park, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, it's 95 degrees, but getting cooler. More game watching, and then home for dinner. This is how we got around. In most of the cases when we were animal watching, a nice Jeep that's designed for the purpose, 3 rows of seats in the back, and 10 people on the tour plus a guide, we all fit just fine. And so everybody had a nice unobstructed view of the animals. So this is one of the parks we went to. This is actually the second one, but there'd be a sign welcoming us, a visitor center, and then we saw lots of animals. And so now I'm going to subject you not to every single animal we saw, but just a sample of some of the stuff. So there's Roz admiring one of the earliest elephants that we saw. It didn't take us long to find that the elephants were hanging right around the house. So if you're going to the central building, you walk around the elephants, give them a respectful distance, which is good because they're 8 feet high or so. Saw antelopes everywhere. These are impala. These were the animals that were just ubiquitous. They were just like they were like the turkeys of Briarwood. You got to kind of ignore them. And of course, lots of elephants, all sizes, from gigantic in the back. He's the master of the herd, to little baby elephants, and Roz particularly loves little baby elephants. As you see, they love the water. There's some Cape buffalo in the back there. More elephants and other sorts of things. Hippopotamuses. Not everybody gets to see hippopotamuses out of the water, but here are some. And Ross has something to say, it looks like. Could I go back one slide? Maybe. Yeah, there.
I want to tell you, is this mic working?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I want to tell you about an experience at dusk at one of the water holes. It had an observation platform which put us about 8 feet up into the air so we could overlook it. Because the animals come to drink in the morning and the evening, we were there in the evening and saw something that you will never ever see in a zoo. The elephants had had their fill and they pretty much had left the water hole. There were a lot of different kinds of game around the water hole. Lots of different antelopes or baboons, just a number of animals, and it seemed very peaceful. And then the baboons started acting up, and they kind of went chip, 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 chip. And I saw them sort of space themselves out around half the water hole, like guardians. And they were on their haunches, very alert. And then, at the far back part of the water hole where the bush ends, we saw some cheetahs. They have to drink too, but they're the predators. So the baboons were letting everyone around the water hole know there are predators present, and we're going to allow them to drink, but they're not going to come after you. So the baboons were the guardians, and they kept up that chip, chip, chip the entire time. We watched the cheetahs slowly come down. They had their drink, and then they disappeared. And by then it was dark, because it was right as dusk was dropping down. But it was an amazing event, and that's how nature takes care of itself. The cheetahs need to get their drinks of water, but they're not going to be allowed to hunt for prey. And the baboons took care of it. Yes, question?
How many cheetahs were there?
I think there were 4. I didn't see all 4. I know I saw 2, because it was getting dark. But it was definitely cheetahs. Anyway, I just thought that was such an unusual experience that you'll never see in a zoo, but we saw nature doing its thing.
Thanks. So back to the wildlife tour. Giraffes, and that's how they drink. I tried this myself. Antelopes of all sorts. This is the sable antelope looking right at us. Baboons were everywhere. You couldn't put anything down. If you put down your camera bag or your drink or anything, the baboons would take off with it. Wildebeest or gnu. Sable antelope, checking out zebras, and these animals are right there. I don't have one of those hotshot cameras, you know, with the lens a mile long that weighs 50 pounds and you have to hire a guy to carry it. I've got a point and shoot, a little, fits in your pocket, just a regular old little bitty camera. But the animals are right there, and they are unmindful of the vehicle. We're just this big tin monster with some arms and legs that you don't want to stick too far out if there are lions and leopards around. But they don't perceive, like a pride of lions doesn't think, I'm going to help myself to a busload of rich tourists. So you're perfectly safe in there, and the animals walk right up to and the guides, of course, are very cognizant of animal behavior. So for instance, here's a rhinoceros checking us out. Those birds that are next to the rhinoceros are called cattle egrets, and they always follow the rhinoceroses around. We have them in this country too, following cattle around, and they're looking for bugs and so forth that are stirred up. And this rhinoceros sees us, and he's looking over there, checking out, oh, here's some more guys in the big iron thing. And the rhinoceroses, the elephants, may bluff a charge. So they'll and the elephant, you know, see Tarzan moving, flare the ears. They're not going to come at you necessarily. The Cape buffalo is the one that just sort of look at you and decide whether they're going to charge you or not. No warning, so you have to watch out for Cape buffalo are troublesome. So here's Cape buffalo. It's got a calf. Looking at us. Okay, take your pictures. Let's keep moving. Most dangerous animal in Africa is the hippopotamus. More people killed by hippopotamuses than elephants, lions, tigers, and bears. But there are no bears, no tigers anyway in Africa. But the hippopotamuses keep confronting people. They live near water, so do we. We have a vegetable garden, nice leafy lettuce. Hippopotamus needs to eat 1,000 pounds of leaves a day or something like that, so they'll just come into the garden and the farmer comes after them with a hoe. Not a good idea. We did see predators. We were lucky enough to see a leopard. Just saw the rear end as it pulled away from us. Leopards are the hardest of the big five to find and to see in the wild. They're nocturnal. They sleep up in the trees. You don't want to be right under the trees looking up for the leopard. And then we did see cheetahs, as Ross was mentioning. This is a telephoto shot. This poor cheetah was hiding behind a rock, hoping to surprise an antelope. And the antelopes walked right by him, and the cheetah's there, you know, just biding their time. And the antelopes saw him and turned around, about 20 antelopes, and started going, and all the other animals in the area scattered. And the cheetah sat there for 15 more minutes and then walked off. No meal this afternoon. And lions, they're right there, lying around. And so we took a bushwalk, took several bushwalks, but here we are in one of the parks in lion country, and we're looking at some old elephant bones. An elephant or two had died there, and the bones are still around. And so our guide is explaining the ecology of the area. Here he is again, and notice he's got a high-powered rifle strapped to his back. There are 18 lions in a pride right in this area. They blend in very well with the grass. And so we all are in this bushwalk, keeping our eyes open for lions. And he's got a high-powered rifle. If we are unexpectedly confronted with a lion, he's going to shoot it. Never had to with us, but it could happen. It's a safety concern. Birds, lots of different kinds of birds. Some of you know that I'm somewhat of a bird watcher, and we saw over 200 different kinds of birds. You see them all over the place. These are some of our favorites. There's the carmine bee-eater. This is the white stork, same one that brings babies in Europe with the nest on the roof. Fairy tale, but it's the same species. It spends the winter, northern winter in South Africa. And then the one in the middle is the secretary bird, so named because if it gets any ideas that it needs to write down, it's got a quill pen right in its head. And the giant ground hornbill, which is an unusual sort of thing, and then marabou storks, and of course ostriches. Largest bird in the world, and we saw lots of ostriches. And crocodiles by the riverside, and vultures waiting around all the time just in case there was a kill. An animal had been left uneaten by the lions or whatever predators, and the vultures were ready. And then we had elephants, a little bit of elephant behavior. Again, you don't see this in a zoo. Here's an elephant pushing over a tree. And you can tell that there's a high elephant population because the trees are knocked down. And the elephant is pushing down the tree so that the young elephants can eat. And so did you want to say anything about baby elephants other than show pictures of baby elephants? I got 3 or 4.
The baby elephants stole my heart. People asked me when I got back, what was your favorite thing? I said the baby elephants. I could have watched elephants at a water hole or walking through the brush day after day, because those baby elephants were just adorable. Huge, but adorable.
Yeah, even baby elephants are big, but they're like ridiculously cute. I mean, they don't have tusks, and they paddle around, and they only weigh 400 pounds. What could possibly go wrong? So more baby elephants. And then we would have occasionally what we would call a lion jam or a leopard jam on the road. The guides, there's a whole bunch of tour groups using the parks. The guides would keep in touch with each other by walkie-talkie radio. And if somebody had sighted a cheetah or a leopard, or sometimes a pride of lions particularly doing something other than lying around doing nothing, then all of the jeeps would converge, and so right in the middle of there must be something. They use cell phones to report rhinoceroses. They don't use the walkie-talkie radio because there are poachers in the parks, and the poachers are going after the rhinoceroses for their horns. So they don't want to give away the position of a rhinoceros, but that anybody with a walkie-talkie can find the cheetah or the leopard or whatever by monitoring that
Say,
frequency.
poachers in the park, they go after the elephants too?
Not so much the elephants. Apparently, there's a good supply of ivory already on the market. So elephants are not poached a whole lot for the ivory. It's occasional, but rhinoceroses, there's no commercial rhinoceros horn supply. And there's a big demand for it in the Middle East and in the Orient. So, and South Africa is about the only place that you could reasonably expect to see rhinoceroses in the wild anymore. They're becoming very rare in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, Namibia, and further north. Yes?
Did you see white rhinos or black rhinos?
We saw both white rhinoceroses and black rhinoceroses. That was a black rhino that was looking at us. Okay, this is what this particular traffic jam is about. It's a lion. It was early in the trip, so we're all jammed up there. By the end of the trip, yeah, lion, whatever, you know. And as they say, we relax in the middle of the day. If the warthogs were out of the pool, we could go in the pool and cool off. And then at the end of the day, we would have what was called a sundowner. They would provide drinks, and we'd pull over by the side of the road, and we'd have little hors d'oeuvres and beer and wine and soft drinks, whatever was here.
Go back.
Go back.
The picture on the left is a middle of the morning stop with coffee and rusks to get us through, because we haven't had a real breakfast yet. And then the sundowner serving on the right is in the evening, and they bring out beer and wine and soft drinks and little snacks. We were treated very well, but it was lovely.
Dinner follow the sundowner?
Dinner was back at the lodge after the sundowner. We never got back to the lodges before 8 o'clock. They waited till full dark so we could see animals right until there was no light.
And then we engaged in some local customs and traditions. And this is going to sound gross to you, but our 9-year-old grandkids love it. The thing in my mouth is a piece of giraffe poop droppings. And it's very, very dry because of the hot sun. And there are no parasites associated with it. I checked on that. But what you do, what the boys do over there, the 9-year-olds anyway, and the 70-year-olds, engage in a poo spitting contest. You see these little dots on the ground, this giraffe poo, and so there are 3 gentlemen, myself and 2 others on this trip, and what you do is you put the poop in your mouth like you just saw, and you go and see how far you can get it, and the winner gets his choice from among the girls, of whom we had 7 along with us on the trip. So I did not win, but fortunately my wife was not chosen as one of the winners. And then there's a local shrub that works fine as a toothbrush. You just strip away a little bit and just nice and brushy it so anything gets caught. This was a good example of our real eating facilities, giraffe poop aside. Very nice, very elegant dinners served in these lodges. And then sometimes we caught our own, and sometimes they did some real designer baking. This is a cobra cake, or cobra bread. And then we had a fishing expedition, caught enough tigerfish for the evening's meal. And so as I say, we started at Kruger National Park in South Africa. We went to a bunch of places. What we're going to do now is we're going to fly up to Victoria Falls, which is right here on the Zambia-Zimbabwe border. And in order to do that, you land in Zambia. When you get off the plane in Zambia, on the way in to get your bags, they take your temperature. If you're running a fever, they put you right back on the plane and send you back to South Africa. So you couldn't come into Zambia at that time if you were running a temperature, because this was during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, and they said the best way we can keep this out is just keep anybody away who's got a fever. But none of us did. We went to Victoria Falls, very spectacular waterfall. There'll be a video of it at the end, I hope. But meanwhile, for those of you who have been to Niagara and think it is pretty cool, which it is, Victoria has it beaten in all major categories of waterfall ratings. So it's twice as high, almost twice as wide, and almost twice as much water during the rainy season. We were there during the dry season, still very spectacular. Have our requisite tourist picture. Hey Mom, we were at Victoria Falls. If you want, you can swim right in the lip of the falls. And so this is a group of younger tourists than our group, and there they are in the water or waiting their turn to dive in and swim. It's 374 feet straight down from right there. And we don't know if these guys survived or not. We probably did. And if you get through that and you really want to bungee jump, there's the International Bridge there at Victoria Falls, and you can rent your bungee cords and hope that they're 371 feet long and don't break on the way down. Other safety hazards, driving at night. You know, here in New England we have deer crossing signs and maybe a moose sign here and there. Over there, wild animal corridor, drive carefully at night. We're talking elephants, rhinoceros, herds of up to 500 Cape buffalo, just crossing the road. No fences or anything. And if you're hungry, go to a restaurant. Here's some of the things on the menu besides your regular fried chicken or burger. Tsesabes and antelope, buffalo, kudu, crocodile, bren, fish, impala, eland, coming soon, guinea fowl, and bushbuck. A couple of other antelopes for your eating pleasure. Or if you want just Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's the Colonel right there in Botswana. Overseas adventure travel encourages us to experience the culture, and so now we're going to go to Jabulani Village in Botswana. And in order to do that, we wanted some natural local ingredients prepared, so we went to the open air market, took money and bought what the local people then would fix for us for lunch. And when you buy stuff over there, you have your choice of using Zimbabwean money or American money, which has just become the official currency. So here's a $500 billion note of Zimbabwean money, and that's essentially worthless. I bought this for two bucks on the street, and that was a rip-off in terms of the value of the money. It's absolutely worthless, and Zimbabwe has done a very effective job of ruining their economy thanks to this guy who has finally been removed as president. But at the time we were there, he was the only president they'd ever had. He was 91 years old. He had been in office since the early 1960s, so going on 50 years. His name was Robert Mugabe. He's not James Earl Jones, although he may look like him, but Mugabe essentially was regarded as a major player and founder of the country's history, and he simply stayed too long. And it would be as though George Washington had really been Franklin Roosevelt but hadn't died. And so by Andrew Jackson's administration, George Washington would still have been in there. Think about that. Everywhere we went, including Jabulani Village, at some point, somebody in authority said the old man has to go, even though he's very revered. So we were welcomed to Jabulani Village. This guy is blowing an antelope horn. And then they would do a little dance and encourage us to join in. So here I am shaking off the dust of the day with some of the tribesmen there before we settle down to a talk And we met the chief of the village, and he told us a lot of stuff about village life and so forth, but his major concern at the time was what was going on in their society. If you look beyond the village, there's this construction right across the road. And what is that construction? Well, what that construction is the new Victoria Falls International Airport. And so here it is, this spectacular structure and all of these engineers and construction workers and so forth over there. It's going to keep the tourist industry going. It's financed almost entirely by Chinese, using American dollars largely. That's where you buy those Chinese goods. This is partly where the money is at. And then the chief told us, he said, our problem is we've got free public education to 8th grade. And beyond that, it's private education. And there's nothing here in the village for that. It has to be in the city, which is 6 miles away. It's private education, you have to pay for it. Whether it's church-related or just a private organization, that's what you need to get a university job or any kind of other job that's going to be meaningful economically. So the jobs at the new international airport are not going to go to the children from Jabberwocky Village, unless they can figure out a way to plug that educational gap. He said that's our greatest need, is higher level education, which is not readily available like it is in your country, America. Meanwhile, the women of the village cooked the meal for us out of the native ingredients. And then the tradition is that the husband or the man of the woman is served by the woman on her knees. And so your wife, in this case, these are our friends from Columbus, she comes, kneels before her husband and presents the luncheon. Well, somebody did sneak a picture from behind of Roz presenting the kneeling. I didn't order this to be taken, but somebody did take it. That's about the only time it's ever happened in 52 years.
It's not going to become established.
It's not at Terrace Cottage number 7. We don't do that. Here's our lunch. Local ingredients. This is kind of a thick porridge. Polenta. Little tiny fishes. These are some vegetables. I don't know what they are. These are caterpillars, which I really enjoy. Nice, lush grubs if you're an entomologist to get into that sort of thing. We visited the local school, and here are the kids showing them off. And then these guys were very proud of the little vegetable garden they had. It took us all over the place. And one of the big breakthroughs they have there is pit toilets recently installed in the school for boys and girls. So they now don't have to run out in the schoolyard and out into the bush to do their business. They can do it right there. And these are just the kids that showed us around the school. This is where the village water supply comes from for the whole Jabberwocky village. Go out there, work the pump, and it comes out of the ground. And then we got a little send-off, and here we have, in this case, was Roz got an opportunity to dance with the tribesmen. And again, we'll see the video toward the end. Then we went from Victoria Falls over here to Impalila Island in the former German Namibia. In order to get there, it's an island, so you take a boat across the Chobe River. And then this is how you get around on Impalila Island. There are no vehicles out there, powered vehicles, no automobiles, no trucks, ox carts that are made out of the rear end of Ford pickup trucks. So they just saw off the cab, truck it over there on the boat, hook it up to a pair of oxen, and you're good to go. But they also have a lot of native crafts, and Roz and I kind of resisted loading up with some of the goods and wares and so forth. We were trying to reduce an 8-room house to a briarwood cottage. And those of you who have successfully done that know what a task it is. those of you who have not successfully done it know where all those boxes are. And this was in the Namibian village. This is the chief's house. And the chief is the only one who has electricity. And the chief has electricity in his house thanks to, again, the Chinese import of a big oversized truck battery and a solar panel. And the chief also has a satellite dish because the chief in there has a television set. And so the chief watches soccer in the evening. And in order to watch soccer in the evening, you need an electric supply, and so he charges the battery during the day and hooks it up to the TV at night and watches soccer. We saw a lot of this. People ask, what did you see the most of in Africa? The road. And we're just driving down the road. Notice we're on the wrong side of the road. That's the British influence. And our final national park was Chobe in Botswana. And this is another interesting little island that's out in the Chobe River. Was contested between Namibia and Botswana to the point that they threatened to go to war, and the International World Court ruled that the island belongs to Botswana. So Botswana went out there, raised a flagpole with a flag. It's the only permanent man-made structure on this island because the island is completely underwater in the rainy season. But it's Botswanans, and so in the rainy season, that flag proudly flies above the floodwaters. And take it any way you wish. Then this is another tourist shot just to show our friends. Yes, we were in Africa. The City of Columbus newspaper has a travel section, and they say if you take a picture of yourself with the Columbus Dispatch travel section on your trip, maybe we will put it in the newspaper. And so Ross and I got 10 minutes of fame out of this, this particular exploit. And then the final send-off was from Bakwino Lodge in Botswana. And here's the staff giving us a send-off. The interesting thing about the last lodge that we stayed in is it is completely managed by women, bottom to top. Top administrator all the way down through the staff and the dishwashers, all women. Now you might say, well, what are those guys doing in there? Those are the bus drivers. But the women run the place. And then we went out on the Chobe River along with our hippopotamus friends, sparing for the final sundowner. This is us celebrating the sunset at the end of the trip on the water. So we lived pretty well. And then of course another party, dance. And so some of us are up there shaking a leg, and then we flew back from up in this area of Botswana back to Joburg and hopped aboard an airplane for 16 more hours of worrying about deep vein thrombosis and getting to know our neighbors really well. And so they always say end the presentation with the sunset. So here's the gate there in Atlanta, Georgia, actually, as we flew back to Columbus. So that is the end of the slideshow. Now the deal is, while Ross talks,
While Dave gets this video up, which is going to show 3 different parts of our trip, I wanted to explain about the cloth I'm wearing. When we went to the native village, all us women were given a piece of cloth which we just tied around our waist so that we would be wearing a skirt. It's out of respect to the women, all of whom were wearing long skirts. So, and of course we were wearing pants or shorts. So out of respect, we all tied on the cloth, and it was a gift to us, so we brought it home. So I'm wearing the same cloth that I wore when we went to the village. We did not know that we were going to get invited to dance with the men, but 3 of us did. And you will see at the very end of the video, there I am in my skirt doing my thing, because I was invited to by one of the tribesmen.
so this is like 3 minutes of video, and then we're done. We're mostly hearing the wind. It's very windy, and so we're hearing some of that. Check out the size of that elephant in the middle there. We're going to pan back through him.
The baby elephants are always surrounded by their parents, the mothers especially. Babies are never left on the outside alone. That's dangerous.
And we're right there.
Go ahead. Go. Me? You.
Oh, I think you called her.
Okay, yeah, and so this just, it says, okay, we're gonna get this on camera. And I can splice in a better copy. So it says Africa, and then the big five are here. The Cape buffalo, the lion, the rhinoceros, the leopard, and the elephant. And on the back, there we go, get lined up. Discover South Africa, Southern Africa, 2015, and then you got an elephant's rear here, which is roughly in the shape of the area of Africa to which we went. So South Africa down here, and then Zimbabwe is up here, Botswana, Impalula Island, the Captiva Strip, and Namibia is over here. And it's got the names of the places that we went to, the different parks, Victoria Falls, a little picture there, and Chobe, Bequia, the places we stayed. Island Lodge, Bequia Lodge, Spray View Hotel, appropriately named, anyway. So, and these were made, oh, and we got the
four flags.
4 flags of the countries that we went to. South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana. And this is just a cute little shot of an
Elephant in the sunset.
elephant in the sunset.
So you designed those?
No,
Or
they-
did OAT do it?
They were designed by a guy who makes t-shirts for a living, a Zimbabwean guy.
That our guide knew.
And he does custom t-shirts, all kinds of custom t-shirts, not just for travel, but you know, he would do Freddie Mercury and Queen if you wanted him to.
Question, Margaret?
I thought you might talk about the dung beetle. Did you see a lot?
Did not see a lot of dung beetles, we saw a lot of dung.
Oh, we saw.
I can talk about dung beetles. It was in the dry season, so how shall I put this delicately? The dung isn't as good from a beetle perspective as when it's fresh and moist. But yeah, there are big piles of dung because they're elephants and rhinoceroses and stuff, and so they're really big beetles that feed on the dung.
Well,
And-
we were told that the beetles get inside the dung, lay their eggs, so that the maturing critters have a nice warm place to be and to feed.
Right, yeah, it's a great place to be if you're a dung beetle larva. It's very soft-bodied. And I could go on at some length about this because there's quite a bit to that story. But let's just say that, and we have them around here too, but just they're little dung beetles because we got little
Animals.
yeah. Deer dung is little pieces, and so we got little beetles. I actually studied dung beetles for part of my career.
Oh, did you?
Well, question over here.
Question, yes, ma'am.
You didn't get a lot of pictures of giraffes. Did you see a lot of giraffes?
We saw a lot of giraffes, and there are some more giraffe pictures, and I guess I sort of had to pick and choose with an hour here. But one of the things that we saw, that if we can do the imitation of the giraffes, how they fight. Remember the young males who could kind of go on like this, and you know.
We did see too, what our guide told us were adolescent giraffes, and they were practice fighting, and they would duck their long head and try and get underneath the other giraffe between his legs, and so he could tip him off balance. But that's a risk to a giraffe, to dip your long neck that low. But that's what they were practicing, and they did it to each other. And it was very interesting, and they kept it up for a good 10 minutes. So that was another behavior one doesn't see in a zoo. We did see a number of giraffes. Often they were either in a distance or they were moving along. And by the time I got my camera out and focused, it was a missed opportunity. So we did see them. Yes.
What was the source of water for the Victoria Falls?
It's the Zambezi River, yeah, which is the third largest river in Africa. There's the Nile and the Congo and the Zambezi.
The source of water for the water holes that we went to, sometimes there was a natural small river and the park would put up a dam so that the water would stay for the animals. Other times, other places, they pumped water into some water holes specifically to make it available to the wildlife. Any other questions? One more.
Just a comment. This is, I have also been to South Africa. And the picture on the back of your shirt was what our ranger called the African salute. Because most of the time, if you're trying to take a picture of a wild animal, what you get is their rear end. Walking away from you.
How many in this room have traveled to South Africa or anywhere in Africa? Oh, see, we're not alone.
Yeah.
Fantastic country. It's a fantastic world, is it not, folks?
Still is.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.